Morning. Any questions before we get started? I hope everybody can log on to the Moodle page. Make sure you can log on to the Moodle page. And I can point out some things. There's the MS Teams group. If you want to join that, you can join that. That's like the questions and answers channel. You can ask questions on MS Teams that you're too scared to ask in the lecture. This is a YouTube playlist that covers a lot of the material. It overlaps with a lot of the material we talk about in this module. And by the way, this is there's a research skills offered by the library too at the University of Nottingham, like how to search for literature, how to read research papers, how to write research papers. You can check out their training too. It overlaps with some of the things we do in here. And if you're curious, I know that you're all very, very curious, that you were born curious. I did put a link to the coursework, the first coursework on Moodle as well. It's a draft. It's not 100% finished, but it's like 90% finished. And I will send out a message on MS Teams when it's finished. But if you want to have a preview of what it's going to be, you can have a preview. Any questions? So today we're going to be talking about your projects, your dissertation projects, some of the logistics, some of the timeline. This module is really intended to support your dissertations, your projects, your master's projects. It's also useful if you do other research projects. It's useful if you do a PhD as well. And if you do have any questions or comments, feel free to interrupt me anytime. I don't mind. And if the class is too silent, I might have to force some audience participation. So this is kind of an introduction to your projects, the projects that you're going to be working on, and that I'm sure that all of you have started thinking about already. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This module is going to help you decide what to do as well, if you follow the advice here. So there are two kinds of projects. There are one-year projects. Probably 90% of you are in the one-year category, where the project starts this spring and it ends in September. There are a small number of you in the two-year or extended MSc category. That's where you get to work on your dissertation for an entire 2 semesters. So it starts in the fall and ends next June. So the idea is to demonstrate that you can take the ideas in this course and apply them to a longer, bigger project. Has anybody here ever written a dissertation before? One person? Where did you do that?
Bachelor's.
Bachelor's? Okay, your third-year project.
Yeah.
What subject was it in?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. Okay, so that's going to help. So we're going to talk a little bit about planning, the design and implementation of a solution, how it fits in the scope of computer science, and evaluating and reflecting on your work. And you're going to see a lot of details, right? You might feel lost, but we're going to give you a lot of help in this module. So this module has a special focus on the research component of your dissertation. But your dissertation really kind of, Gesundheit is a research project, right? So it's designed to teach you how we do research in computer science and provide an introduction to the ideas behind dissertations. So today we're just going to give you a first look or introduction to your projects, especially like the overall structure. And we're going to go into this in more detail in future seminars, by the way, future lectures, right? And we're going to look at some dissertations. So on Friday, we're going to go into even more detail, and we're going to look at some previous dissertations, and you're actually going to evaluate them. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? I bet you've never done anything like. Did you do that? You did that?
Yeah.
You were in a good place. Where did you study?
Bristol.
Bristol. Okay, that was a good program. Sounds like a good program, at least. So, you submit a project plan. This is for year 1 students. This is for 90% of you. You write a dissertation that may include supplementary material, and then you give a presentation in September, possibly October. For the extended MSc, you have the same plan. You have a first semester report, which is the progress that you make after your first semester. It can also be thought of as an interim report. There's a presentation, and there's a dissertation with supplementary material. That's the same. And then you have the chance to write a research paper as well. That's the extended. How many people here are in the extended MSc course? Okay, good, good. These are some different modules that are related to this module, and they're basically all the specializations. So I think everybody is enrolled in this one. This is your 60 credit, I think this is your 60 credit module. Then there's a specialization for everybody enrolled in AI. There's a specialization module for everybody enrolled in the HCI track, and so on. The data science track, cybersecurity track. This is the one you enroll in if you're in the extended or enhanced MSc. This is a specialization of enhanced MSc plus artificial intelligence. And then this is the enhanced MSc for cyber physical systems, right? So you'll be enrolled in one or more of these other supplementary, complementary modules to actually submit your dissertation. So today we're going to talk about some of the material on the Moodle page, which covers the project modules, right? And we're going to we encourage you to look at the so-called student handbook section, right, of the enhanced MSc research project dissertation for both of these modules. So I've already gotten some questions about the timeline, like when do things happen? So this is some explanation as to when things happen. So at the end of this month, there's a so-called list of supervisors that's released, right? So you get all the possible supervisors. And then during the March and April time frame, you look for a supervisor. And then from the April-June time frame, you start your project. Really what you want to do is start your project in this module. You want your project and this module to overlap as much as possible. Some people succeed in doing this, and some people don't succeed in doing this. But in this module, you write a literature review. You have to. So if you're really, really on the ball, your literature review for this module will overlap directly with your dissertation, so you'll feed two birds with one stone. Otherwise, you have to write two literature reviews, one for this module and a different one for your dissertation. So I highly encourage you to try to get as much overlap between the two as possible. There's a so-called ethics checklist, which we'll mention. There's a full ethics check form. There's a project plan due in mid-July that nobody ever follows. And then your dissertation with supplementary material is submitted in mid-September. And your presentations are shortly after that. So they could be, it just depends on when you and your supervisor schedule your presentation, basically. So it could be mid-September, but it could also be a little earlier or a little bit later. Any questions about the timeline and what is going to happen when? This is the timeline for the enhanced MSc students. So same thing with the supervisors, same thing with the project and the supervisor. So your project doesn't start until later, and you kind of have the option. It starts definitely in September, but you could start it earlier. Like if you're really on the ball, you'll start it earlier. You know, get the literature review out of the way and start your project as soon as you can, basically. The more time you have, the better you'll do. There's a preliminary ethics checklist, same thing as the other program, but it's due in mid-October. Then a full ethics form if necessary. A project plan due late in October. The first semester report is due in late January. That's like an interim report. It just shows your progress. This year, actually, it's due in February. So these are approximate times. There are presentations late January or early February, and then the dissertation and supplementary material is due in June. And the research paper is due at the end of the second semester. Here you can see the weightings of each component. So they hopefully add up to something reasonable. Any questions about the enhanced MSc timeline? So what is a project? It's some sort of concentrated, larger piece of work that you're not used to working on, that you're not used to doing. It's not just a coursework. It's supposed to be a big extended, concentrated project, right? So it tries to draw on all the knowledge and all the skills that you developed in your regular classes, and then you apply it to some topic to go into more depth. Right? Your classes are very shallow, right? When you sit in a module and you do a coursework, you touch on a topic, you study it for a few hours, and you get kind of a breadth. You can think of that as breadth. You get exposed a little bit to many different topics and many different subjects. And then the dissertation says, okay, forget that breadth. Let's go a little bit deeper into one direction and spend more time in that direction. So you get expertise in some subject, right? So a typical project looks like this. You identify a problem, or you formulate a question, or you formulate a hypothesis, and you try to state it clearly. Doesn't have to be clear, but you try your best to state it clearly. And then you look at what has already been done in that area. So if you have some topic, you say, okay, now I want to figure out who has worked on this topic already and what have they done. Once you know what has been done previously, then you try to do something, you try to implement a solution yourself, right? In the ideal world, it would be a unique new solution. It does not have to be a unique new solution, but in the ideal world, you would do something novel, right? And then you test and evaluate whatever it is you did. You may have developed software, you may have conducted an experiment, you may have conducted a human-computer interaction study. Whatever you did, you come up with a plan on how you evaluate that. And we do talk about that in this module. Right? Is there some sort of testing or evaluation, maybe testing with users, for example? There could be some statistical tests. And then finally, you reflect on the things that went well and things that you might have done differently if you were to start over, for example. Yeah, and then the written document provides an overview of what you did. That's the idea. So the first step is finding a topic. Right? So probably when you were studying, you did find some topics more interesting than others. So you probably already have some ideas about what you think is more interesting and what you think is less interesting. So we're going to release a list of supervisors in this month, so just in a few weeks. And then every supervisor provides a list of project ideas. If you want a preview, you can go to my webpage, and there's you click on Teaching, and then Projects, Project Development and Specification, and you can see like a list of Bob's project ideas, and then you see a list of what those ideas looks like if you want a preview. But you'll be provided with a very, very large list, like hundreds of options. I think it's going to be difficult just to see all the options. You won't even be able to read them all because there'll be hundreds of them, right? We have probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 supervisors, and they're all going to provide 4 or 5 project ideas. So it's good to already have some idea, like, okay, I think I'm interested in visualization, so I think I'm going to at least choose something in visualization, for example, or graphics, or HCI. It's good to have a rough idea of the direction. And then you contact a supervisor in person or via email, right, and see if they will supervise the project that you chose. So you get the list, choose a project, contact the supervisor, and see if they will supervise it. Right. The earlier you do it, the better. You know, sometimes it's a first come, first serve process. So there are always a few students that are very, very late, and they find something they like, and then they write to the supervisor, and the supervisor says, sorry, I'm already supervising 5 students, I can't do any more. So you don't get that choice. So it's in your best interest to start thinking about this soon. If you're one of the last people to choose, probably you won't get your first choice, because that person will already be have already agreed with, you know, 3 to 5 students already. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So try not to be too late. That's just tonight. This is just a preview of what it looks like. So you'll be given a link on Moodle, and then the Moodle page will have the list of all the supervisors and a link to their project ideas. Right? Mine are already there on my own web page if you want to get a preview. So once you've agreed on a project, if you're happy with the topic and the supervisor is happy, the supervisor then signs you up, puts your name with a project, right? Assigns you to a project in Moodle. And by the way, you can develop your own project. You don't have to choose one of the pre-existing projects. Right? You can develop your own idea and just find somebody to supervise it. That's fine. If you look at my project ideas, it says, like, develop your own visualization project. And here are a list of all the different topics that previous students have worked on. Yeah, one little sort of, I don't know, caveat, if you want to call it that, is a lot of students have come up to me and they say, oh, I have this idea for a project. I'm going to twiddle my thumbs. I'm exaggerating, but they propose something that's extremely easy and simple. Like, I'm going to run up and down the stairs a few times. I can't think of a good example, but they propose, and they say, I have my idea for my own project, and it's super, super easy and simple. And that usually doesn't work. So you'll want to think of something that is non-trivial. Maybe the supervisor will say, okay, but let's make it a little bit non-trivial and do this, that, the other thing. That's usually what I say. Like, I say, okay, that's fine, but it's too easy and simple. Let's make it more complicated by adding this part, and the other part. Every project requires an ethics checklist. So it's paperwork, administrative paperwork. It determines whether there are any research ethics implications of your project that need further investigation. This is really, especially if your project involves some sort of a human-computer interaction user study. Like, you're going to set up an experiment, you're going to recruit 20 participants, and they're going to interact with some hardware and software. You're going to evaluate their performance and then examine the data, the task data. Then you need a little bit more of an ethics, like a little bit, another ethics form, just to make sure that your experiment is a standard HCI experiment. But if you're not doing that, if you're simply developing a piece of software, like trying to, I don't know, make a database query faster, or some faster algorithm, or prove the correctness of an algorithm, then this simple ethics checklist will be fine, and you don't have to think about it, right? If you need special equipment, you can check. We might have special equipment that you can use. I know some of the staff do have very special equipment. If you need something like a special data set that costs money, a special piece of software that costs money, or vouchers for user studies, for example, you can also ask your supervisor and talk to them about this, right? So don't be afraid to discuss that. Some projects involve companies and external collaborators, collaborations with other departments, for example, or industry collaborators. So that's an added bonus. And if you are lucky enough to work with a company, that company will obviously try to hire you at the end of your project. This is just what that preliminary ethics form looks like. It's very fast, and then you just fill it out and submit it. Okay, so to track your project progress, right? You'll have regular meetings with a supervisor, right? Now you're already all experts at this. So since last Friday, you know exactly what to do, right? Just follow this minutes of meeting protocol. The better you can follow this, the better your project will go. Your supervisor's not going to follow this protocol, generally speaking, right? So it's up to you whether or not you want to follow this protocol. But I can say from experience, the better a student can follow this protocol, the better their project goes. I can predict how well a project's going to end based on the minutes of meeting protocol. So what does a good project look like? We're going to see what a good project looks like also on Friday during the workshop, by the way. So some of the qualities of a good project, it puts the work into context. That just means it looks at the previous related work and then says, okay, here's what's been done previously. I know about it. Here's a summary of it. And here is how the work I'm going to do is related to the previous work. Right? Maybe it makes something faster than the previous work, or it adds some new features, or it overcomes some limitations of some previous work. So it shows competency in design and implementation, right? You have a section there called technology choices where you evaluate the different kinds of software and hardware options that you could use for your implementation. Ideally, it shows some innovation and some original ideas. It's not a requirement to show original ideas and innovation, but it is a very good quality of a good dissertation. It has an evaluation, some sort of testing and evaluation component. This is really difficult, actually. A lot of students don't quite manage to do this because it's difficult. You're putting all your focus on the implementation, which I understand because it's very difficult. And then at the end, you're supposed to demonstrate it's actually working. That's the evaluation and the testing, and then that's sometimes neglected because it's left until the last minute, like the day before the submission. Like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna test this and evaluate it? How am I gonna demonstrate that it really achieves its objectives? But the best dissertations have a nice testing and evaluation section. Of course, it uses professional technical language and is proofread by a native English speaker or professional. Right. I guess there are lots of people here that are not native English speakers, so that's something you want to pay attention to. And it's straightforward to navigate and understand. Here are some common mistakes that I've seen 100,000 million times. Not that many, but I see them every year. Starting too late is a common mistake. The earlier you can start. What do I mean by start? Like just looking for a topic that you're interested in. Like the sooner you can start that, the better. This module is going to help with that, by the way. That's part of the objective of this module. Not choosing a topic that you're interested in. This is really, really critical to try to figure out a topic that you're interested in. Right? I guess it's obvious, but really you don't want to be in a situation where you're working on a project that you don't like, and you're just like, I don't find this interesting, I don't care about this topic. Try hard to avoid that. Try to explore and figure out what topics you find interesting. Dedicate some thought to that. It's better to be working on a project you're interested in with a supervisor that's not interested in it than the other way around. You don't want to be working on a project you're not interested in that your supervisor is interested in. That's like, you want it the other way around. In the ideal case, you're both interested in the project, right? The worst case is neither one of you. If you're both not interested, that's really the worst case scenario. But the second best scenario is you are interested and your supervisor's not. I know you don't want that scenario, but that's the second best. The third best, or the second to worst, is you're not interested, but your supervisor is. And then you're just going to be miserable, right? A common mistake is not thinking about the evaluation at all, right? Just not thinking about it. Not having any sort of plan. Not reading Bob's project guidelines. We're going to see a document called Bob's project guidelines. If you don't look at those and don't read those, that's a mistake, very common error. Not investigating the related work. I see this a lot, like people don't put very much effort into investigating the related work. Not getting help with the language. There's no more excuses for this. I know it's really difficult. I know that from experience, right? I wrote my PhD in a German-speaking country, and I didn't know a single word of German when I entered the country. So I know what this is like. But you still don't want to use that as an excuse. There are so many tools now to help you with the language, right? If you haven't used Grammarly, figure it out and start using it, right? It's software that helps you write. And this university spends millions of pounds for you guys on language services, right? There's a language center for English language education here at the university, and you're paying for it. You paid your tuition. Part of your tuition goes to this language center, so you may as well use it, right? So please take advantage of the language, software-based language and in-person-based language resources available to you. Make friends with a native English speaker, and say, hey, I will take you out to lunch if you proofread this chapter for me. You can find all the errors. Okay, so the first deliverable is a project plan. So in the project plan, you explain the motivation behind your project. Where does the idea come from? What is the hypothesis, the question, or the idea, or the problem you want to solve? What are the related ideas and papers, and how will they inform your work? And then you want to explain how you're going to organize it, right? You want to break it down into components. Don't stress about this part, because your project never goes according to the plan, right? I've never seen a project where somebody says, okay, this is my plan, and then it actually follows the plan. I've never seen that before. And we're going to talk about this in more detail, by the way. This is an overview. So the assessment of your project plan looks like this. Is there a clear statement of what your project is about, what problem you're trying to solve, which hypothesis you might have, or what question you're trying to address? Is there an explanation of why this problem needs to be addressed? So the motivation, What's the motivation behind your project? Is there any novelty? Or is there, well, I guess could also be thought of as like, what is it about your project that makes it interesting? Like what aspect do you find it interesting that's not just simply a repeat of something that's been done before? Is there a statement about how you're going to approach the problem question?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have any guidance on how to find good related work? Because sometimes it's a very niche topic and you can't really find anything useful, so you don't want to waste time reading things that aren't related, you know?
Yes. What's your name again?
Zeus.
Zeus asked, do we have guidance on finding related work? The answer is no. No, just kidding. We're going to go into how to find related work in this module. We're going to have a workshop and some slides about finding related work. But does anybody know the answer to that question already? How to find related work? I can give you a very short answer.
You just search for keywords in Google Scholar.
You can search for keywords on Google. So Google Scholar is a good tool. Yep, looking for your topic in Google Scholar. Yes, the supervisor. Ask the supervisor. That's a good one too. Yes, that's what I was thinking. You read my mind. Well done. Well done. Talking to people is another one. Just not only the supervisor, but anybody that's in that. But like the simplest starting point is just Google Scholar. Like, I don't know, explainable and trustworthy AI. Put that into Google Scholar. That's the simplest starting point. And it's usually really good. Google Scholar is really good. I use Google Scholar. It's not the only thing I use, but I use it, and it's really good.
I had a question regarding sort of plagiarism.
Okay.
Because I did a project in my third year at undergrad, which I would like to be able to do a sort of continuation of.
Okay.
But would I plagiarize myself?
You'd have to cite yourself. You'd have to cite yourself. So you'd say, like, the following text is it could be adapted from your previous dissertation, then you cite it. But if you copy it, you'd have to put quotes around them, and then cite your dissertation.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
To avoid plagiarism.
Yeah, I was wondering as well, is it kind of considered the same as any other sort of dissertation if it's an undergrad one?
It's not considered the same as, let's say, previous research, because it hasn't undergone a peer review process. Does that phrase make sense? So that peer review is when other people look at it and give it their stamp of approval. So you can cite it, but it's not going to be the equivalent of a previous research paper. Yeah, and in your case, probably what you would do is you would paraphrase the material, because assuming that you've evolved intellectually since your third year dissertation, like you're more educated now, you've thought about the topic more, you can articulate it better now than you could a year ago, so you'd be paraphrasing it rather than just like lifting a whole paragraph and quoting it, if you know what I mean. Okay, is there some statement about how you're going to solve your problem? How are you going to evaluate your work? Is there a breakdown of the research into work packages? That's very advanced. But anyway, is there some sort of a subdivision, like the first step is going to be to create a mock-up of the user interface, for example. Step 2 is going to be to develop the storage of the software, like the database. And step 3 will be, the processing part of the software, and so on. Okay, so that's and for the enhanced MSc students, they have an interim report, right? That's a report that's like halfway through the project. And it just shows your progress, like what have you achieved up to that point? What have you found out by looking at the previously related literature? Have your plans changed? What's the correspondence between your plan and your actual reality? Is there any correspondence? And what is your plan for the remainder of the projects? And how are you going to organize your time?
At this point, should we have code started or?
Definitely. You should have a significant implementation by that time. Yeah, like you've already implemented half of it, for example, by that time. This is about the halfway point, approximately, for extended MSc. The one-year students don't have this because it's such a short time frame. Okay, and then there is a presentation right at the end. The presentation gives a demo of your project, whatever it is that you worked on. A lot of people write software, right? So you're giving a demo of the software. Usually it's a screen capture demo, like in the form of a video. So, and you're going to know how to do that because for this module you create a video. So you have some combination usually of slides and a video and a demo of the software. And your video focuses on the aspects that are very difficult to convey in writing. That's typically like interaction and user interfaces, right? It's very difficult to convey interaction in a static document with words. Right? You can do it, but it's not very nice. So a demo video usually demonstrates the interaction or the time-dependent phenomena in your project. And the presentation is given to a small group of staff and students. And the target audience is really the other students, right? How can you get the other students to understand your project? The supervisor understands your project, right? They already know what it's about. You're really trying to communicate it to a set of students that are in your class. Okay, for the actual writing of the dissertation, there's a document called Bob's Project Guidelines. There is a copy of this document already on Moodle. I put a copy there. We're going to look at it a little bit more on Friday. The target audience is a fellow MSc student. Your dissertation has a word count. So the word count is 20,000 maximum, right, for one-year students, and 30,000 for enhanced MSc two-year students. I get this question a lot, like how many words should my dissertation be? I get that question a lot. Yeah.
Page count?
I don't think there's a special page count, but you can see previous dissertations if you want. We're going to see some previous ones on Friday. But you can, if you want, you can also go to my webpage. If you go to my webpage and click on teaching, you see a list of students in previous dissertations. They don't all have previous dissertations there. Only the good ones are there. Or the ones that I think are good to show to the world.
Does these word count include like the references?
I wouldn't worry about that too much, yeah. That's going to be up to the supervisor, really, how strict they want to be with the word limit, because it's going to be the supervisor and a second marker scoring it. But I wouldn't worry about that aspect. So the marking is so-called holistic, right? That will mean the supervisor will, in the second marker, they'll basically form an opinion about it, and then they'll go through each different aspect, one by one, each section, and look at it from different angles to come up with a score, and they'll rank each section as each aspect, right? And the scores are also moderated, right? So it's not just one person scoring it. Multiple people will score your dissertation, right? But these are some of the things that we look at when we're assessing the dissertation.
Is the supervisor one of the people who actually marks it, or is it always something?
Yes, the supervisor is the first marker, yes. Yep. I mean, it is appropriate because the supervisor has the best idea of what actually happened, right? The supervisor's meeting you on a regular basis, so they I already know what happened. I almost don't even have to look at the document. I know what happened. So I look at the document just as a kind of, to see, make sure. But I already have a score in mind when they submit before I even see it. And I already have a rough idea of the progress before they even submit it. So let's say I have a good idea of what the score is going to be without looking at it even. But of course, my idea can be wrong, but it's always within 10 points. I've never been like completely wrong about the score. You can submit supplementary material. A lot of dissertations will have supplementary material. It could be source code. It could be ethics documents. It could be supplementary figures, planning documents, user guides, and so on. There could be anything you produced, any other artifacts you produced during your project. You can include as supplementary material. A video is a very good piece of supplementary material. A video demonstration of whatever it is that you produced, right? And that can just be a URL, like see the supplementary video, and you provide a URL to the supplementary video. This is for the enhanced MSc, the 2-year one. You have at the end, you try to write a research paper. So this is kind of going backwards, and then you're trying to condense your work into a nice 4 to 10 page document that looks like a research paper. Right? For the enhanced MSc, there's more of an expectation that you're going to do something original. You have more time to do something new, and you have a better chance at actually publishing the work if you want to, if you succeed in doing something novel. By the way, I have published some master's theses work. So I have actually written research papers with master's students and sent them to conferences to present their work. So it can happen. But it's only for a very small number of students. Okay, in keeping track of your progress, you already know how to do that. Since last Friday, you can use Bob's Minutes of Meeting protocol to keep track. There's some things about academic integrity. Make sure that you're not plagiarizing and so on. I don't really like to talk about this too much. But if you're using other people's work, you have to cite that work. It could be anything, source code, diagrams, images, text, right? Just make sure you cite where you get the material from. As far as I'm concerned, the more citations and references you have, the better, right? It's a good thing to have citations and references. Then you show, oh, look, I've really done my homework. Look at all this research I did. Okay, are there any questions? Any other questions? What's your name again?
Adam,
Adam.
does the uni automatically copyright projects that we make?
No, they don't. Do you want, the only time copyright is sort of a factor is if there's a company involved. Right, and that,
My last uni, East Anglia, they had a automatic system where they copyrighted it. So I could release the thing unless the patent something.
I'm not aware of any copyright policy here. I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah. I'm not aware of any. But the other question is, even if there is a copyright policy, is it enforceable? Not really. There's no copyright police gonna knock on your door.
My assumption was it's made that they release a project something
That's never gonna happen.
but it happens in there 0.0
I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the UK. Okay, you're free. I'll see everybody on Friday.